Why do the least skilled people often think they're the smartest in the room? Why does ignorance so often wear the mask of confidence? And why do we all, at some point, fall into the trap of thinking we know more than we really do? Psychologists David Dunning and Dunning Kruger had the same question in the late 20th century. What they discovered not only explained countless everyday frustrations, bad drivers, loud mouths at work, the friend who insists they know everything, but also shed light on some of the biggest issues facing our world today. It's called the Dunning Kruger effect, and it reveals something uncomfortable. The less we know, the more likely we are to overestimate ourselves. Meanwhile, those who truly understand a subject often underestimate their knowledge. This paradox explains so much of modern life. Why conspiracy theories spread, why social media is full of experts, why politics rewards the loudest rather than the wisest. So today, let's explore the science, the history, the philosophy, and the very human comedy of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and discover how ignorance breeds confidence. The story begins in 1995 with a man named MacArthur Wheeler. He walked into two banks in Pittsburgh, broad daylight, and robbed them with no disguise. Hours later, he was arrested. When police showed him the surveillance footage, he was shocked. His defense? He thought he was invisible. Why? Because he had rubbed lemon juice on his face. Wheeler believed that, since lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, it would make his face invisible to cameras. This bizarre misunderstanding caught the attention of psychologists David Dunning and Dunning Kruger. How could someone be so confident, yet so wrong? In 1999, they published a now famous study. They tested people on humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. Participants who scored in the lowest quartile consistently overestimated their abilities, often believing they had performed better than average. Meanwhile, the higher scorers tended to underestimate themselves. The researchers concluded, incompetence robs people of the ability to recognize their own incompetence. Or, in simpler terms, the less you know, the less you realize you don't know. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect was born. At its heart, the Dunning-Kruger effect is about metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. Skilled people have the tools to evaluate themselves honestly. Unskilled people don't. Most people believe they are above average at driving, intelligence, morality. Statistically impossible, but psychologically comforting. Incompetent individuals often dismiss criticism or fail to learn from mistakes. If you don't know the rules of grammar, you can't see your errors. If you don't understand economics, you can't recognize flawed financial advice. Research using brain imaging shows that self-monitoring requires the prefrontal cortex. When this area is underdeveloped or underused, people lack awareness of their limitations. Essentially, the brain needs skill to evaluate skill. Ignorance isn't just lack of knowledge. It's a double ignorance. Not knowing and not knowing that you don't know. This idea isn't new. Philosophers have wrestled with it for centuries. Socrates famously declared, "The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing." Unlike the overconfident, Socrates recognized the vastness of ignorance. His humility was his strength. Plato's allegory of the cave describes people mistaking shadows for reality, believing they understand when in fact they're trapped in illusion. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in allegory form. The Enlightenment wrestled with illusions of knowledge. Francis Bacon warned of idols of the mind, biases, and false beliefs that distort understanding. Modern skeptics echo this. Carl Sagan noted how fragile knowledge is in the face of confident ignorance. Richard Feynman, Nobel-winning physicist, said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." The Dunning-Kruger effect is the scientific articulation of a timeless philosophical truth. Ignorance breeds overconfidence, wisdom breeds humility. Nowhere is the Dunning-Kruger effect more visible than in the 21st century. Platforms reward confidence, not competence. The loudest voices rise, regardless of accuracy. Misinformation spreads faster than truth because it is delivered with certainty. Studies show false claims on Twitter divided by X spread 6 times faster than true ones. Voters often reward charisma and confidence over expertise. Leaders who lack deep understanding but project certainty gain followers. History is filled with overconfident leaders whose poor judgment led to disaster. Incompetent bosses often believe they're brilliant. Studies show employees with lower competence often overrate themselves in performance reviews, while highly competent employees underrate themselves. This mismatch fuels frustration in organizations worldwide. People with little scientific background often claim to know better than experts. During the COVID-19 pandemic, countless armchair virologists dismissed trained scientists. The less they knew, the more confident they seemed. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the invisible hand guiding so much dysfunction in our world today. If ignorance breeds confidence, knowledge often breeds doubt. Enter imposter syndrome. Impostor syndrome is the mirror of Dunning Kruger. Competent people often underestimate themselves, believing they're frauds. They see the vastness of what they don't know, and it overshadows what they do know. This explains why some of the most talented individuals remain humble, while some of the least capable are the loudest. Society often mistakes confidence for competence. A mediocre candidate with swagger may outshine a brilliant one with quiet humility. The irony: those who know the least shout the loudest. Those who know the most whisper in self-doubt. MacArthur Wheeler and his lemon juice invisibility heist. 2008 financial crisis. Many experts who overestimated their knowledge helped fuel disaster. Brexit. Populism. Overconfident claims about economics swayed voters. Everyday life. The karaoke singer convinced they're amazing. The coworker who thinks they could run the company better. The uncle who knows more than doctors. Humor makes these stories engaging, but the consequences are deadly serious. 88% of Americans rate their driving as above average. Cross-cultural research finds the Dunning-Kruger effect present worldwide, though it varies in intensity. In workplaces, overconfidence correlates with higher promotion rates even when competence is lacking. Educational studies show students with the lowest exam scores most often predict they did above average. Data paints a clear picture. Overconfidence is common, global, and consequential. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just an amusing quirk, it's dangerous. Misinformation, overconfident ignorance floods the internet. Poor decision-making. Leaders and voters act on false confidence. Social polarization, confident ignorance entrenches division. Public health risks. From anti-vaccine movements to climate denial, ignorance dressed as certainty costs lives. In a world facing existential crises, the loudest voices cannot afford to be the most ignorant. So how do we resist the Dunning-Kruger trap? Cultivate humility. Remember Socrates, wisdom begins with knowing what you don't know. Seek feedback. Honest criticism is painful but essential. Practice lifelong learning. The more you know, the more you realize how much there is to learn. Reward competence over confidence. As a society, value substance, not just style. Encourage intellectual curiosity. Ask more questions, give fewer declarations. Personal humility and cultural reform together can blunt the dangers of overconfidence. So why do stupid people think they're smart? Because ignorance hides itself. The less we know, the less we realize we don't know. Confidence fills the gap left by knowledge. Meanwhile, true intelligence often looks like doubt, humility, and curiosity. The wisest are those who admit ignorance, who keep learning, who never mistake certainty for truth. Einstein reminded us that intelligence is measured by the ability to change. Socrates reminded us that wisdom begins with recognizing our ignorance. Together, they give us a compass to resist the arrogance of certainty and embrace the humility of learning. So I'll leave you with this question. In a world full of overconfidence, will you choose the ignorance of certainty or the intelligence of change? If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe to Beyond Essence. Here, we explore psychology, philosophy, and world affairs through the lens of timeless wisdom.